In today's video, we're going to look at considerations to make when programming for the general public. So this video will probably be of most value to coaches, personal trainers, small group coaches, and if you're part of the general public, it might be helpful for you too. Just there might be a few nuggets in there. But the main things I'm going to look at are mistakes I see and considerations I see with large group programming or small group programming over the years. Primarily, I'm going to be talking about small group programming here. So, again, just to keep it specific, this is for general public. This is for not for people who have specific goals in sports or specific goals in getting to a certain weight or building certain areas of their body or anything like that. This is just training for the general public. So I hope this brings a bit of value to coaches who are group programming and gives you something to think about as well. It's another way of looking at group programming too. So on to the first slide. We are going to look at programming is simple but often overcomplicated. So the first thing is to understand the goal. So they are more general than specific but can still be broken down into goals. So just because there are no specific training goals, so this is where trainers, when you're brought into your course, or if you look at any personal training or S&C or anything like that, the first thing you kind of look at, or in the first chapter at least, is going to be the 7 training principles or whatever. And the first is always specificity. Just because the goals aren't super specific doesn't mean they can't be broken down. So the general public, the goals are quite simple. It's to feel better, become stronger, increase your cardiovascular fitness, move pain-free, increase your range of motion, and improve your daily functionality. So, you're kind of giving people the energy and giving people the strength to be able to do more in their day, not to be running out of gas when they're mowing the lawn, or not to be fearful of throwing their kid above their head so they don't pop out a part of their back. And it's just kind of adding value to people's daily lives. So how can we focus on all of these components when coaching a group of 4 to 6 people through a program with vast differences? So for example, in a group of 6, I could have people aged between 16 and 60, males, females, people with injuries, people with limitations from old injuries or movement limitations as it is, people with lots of experience and as a result lots of confidence, or people with very little experience and as a result very little confidence in the gym. So we're going to start with the basics as always. And when I say basics here, I'm going to keep this just as an overview. I'm not going to delve into day-by-day programming or movement selection or anything like that. We're just going to look at the principles around it and some notes and considerations. So again, it's for the general public with no specific goals, aside from bettering themselves through their training. So once your program is made, or the model is made, be it 2 to 6 days, it's time to input the movements. So a lot of different semi-private or private gyms or personal trainers would say, okay, well, you're part of this group, you're in 2 days a week. So then they'll program for you guys, or you're in 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. So the first thing you need to do is, for the general public, is you need to think about exposing them to simple movements and simple movement patterns. So your push, pull, squat, hinge, your carries, different things like this, very basics. I just threw in some examples there. So push, a bench press, pull, chin-ups, squat, lunging, hinging. Hinges would be any hip extension like a Romanian deadlift, and carries, farmer walks. So the first thing you want to keep in mind is that the skill plus the movement pattern is way more important than any volume and any intensity you get into. So it's funny, if you join a boxing gym, if you join a weightlifting gym or any gym that's quite specific to a skill, they look at the skill and the movement first. Everything's slowed down. If any of you have ever tried wrestling or jiu-jitsu, like, it's very slow to start. You're barely breaking a sweat, but you're working on those movement patterns. It seems that when people join a gym or join a class or join a group, they think, right, volume needs to ramp up. This has to be intense, otherwise it wasn't valuable to me. But it is so much more valuable to get that skill, get that, and then down the line up the volume and intensity. If you skip the skills and movement part, you're going to be piling on volume and piling on intensity to poor movement, and you're not going to get the most out of it in the long run. So what else do the general public need? So once you have programmed in the push, pull, squat, hinge, carry work, let's look elsewhere. So the way I kind of do that for the general public is maybe, let's say I'm programming 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's what days this group is going to be in or is going to be working out. I would say, okay, well, of course you take the group's considerations into account. Maybe there's three of them, and you'd say, right, well, look, I want to fit in, if it's 3 full body days, I want to fit in 2 pushes, 2 pulls, 2 squats, 2 hinges, 2 carries, or 1 carry or whatever. And you want to plant those around the different days. So once you've picked the movements, that's when you start to look at the other things. So let's say I have someone on Monday and I have them doing a squat first, then a pull and a push superset, and then I have carry and body weight and core thrown in. That's their Monday. That's how I might start it. And then I would take the other movement specifications I didn't use, like your hinge, and I would throw that into the next day and make that a priority as one of the first lifts in the exercise selection, and then work my way down. So again, just programming the movement patterns first. The next thing you want to look at is unilateral work, so single limb work. This is your single leg box squats, single arm presses, single arm rows, just single limb work. Bilateral work is also quite important, but that will be thrown into other lifts. So bilateral work would be, rather than a bench press, a dumbbell bench press, where you have a dumbbell in each hand. But I would first of all say, try and fit some single limb work into your program. Not every day into your program. Cardiovascular work and muscle fiber work, so your heart and lungs, of course, your aerobic and anaerobic work is going to be super important. On top of that, your slow twitch and fast twitch is going to be super important. And these are kind of things that can be, your fast twitch can be microdosed, you know, throwing in a few depth jumps or broad jumps or things like that. Or if you can't jump, just maybe a few ball slams, working through certain time scales where maybe it's 6 seconds on and 2 minutes off or something. There's 101 ways you can do that. Your aerobic work and anaerobic work are quite simple as well. So anaerobic and fast twitch can be programmed together. Or you can do some heavy anaerobic work where, I don't know, you're doing 15 seconds on, 90 seconds off. That would be on the far end of it. That'd be caving in on aerobic work. Or where you have your 8 seconds on, 3 minutes off. It doesn't have to be as boring as that. You can program it through lifts and jumps as well. Your aerobic work is where a lot of people fall down, and they think, when people think aerobic work, rather than looking at your heart rate, they're looking at a movement like rowing, biking, running, and just holding this pace for a certain amount of time. But aerobic work is very easy to program. You want to spike their heart rate up a small bit and just keep it up there. So EMOMs, AMRAP circuits, where you're able to fit in your unilateral work, cardiovascular work, a push, a pull, things like that, where you're constantly moving for 10 to 12 minutes or maybe more, 20 minutes, and your heart rate staying a bit spiked between 130, 150. You're going to get the same kind of adaptation from just doing single modality cardio work, like on a bike or whatever. So it's important to keep that kind of varied, but keep the group in mind when doing that. So obviously, if you have a group of 3 and you only have 2 bikes, you're not going to say program a bike for 20 minutes, or you're not going to keep it as boring as that. So mobility work through range of motion and body weight. So when I say through range of motion, I mean through weighted range of motion. So a full range of motion squat, a full range of motion looking to get into a Bulgarian split squat position, things like that. So simple things where you're going through a full or greater range of motion using weights. And then the other one is body weight work. This is the stuff you kind of see, the generic stuff at the start of a session, where people might do a dead hang, people might hold a wall sit or a deep squat, they might do some hip and ankle mobility, simple things like that you want to microdose in. Body weight strength and body weight movement, always important to have in at least one of the days in the program. I mean, simple things like ring rows, learning to do a push-up, learning to do a chin-up, really simple things, but I think it's very important to get control of your body weight strength. I know a lot of people who can bench quite heavy, maybe 100 kg for a couple of reps, but you ask them to do 15 push-ups and it looks like shit. I think it's important to get your body weight strength to a certain position. And then core work and stability work. Again, my definition of core work is different from ab work. So ab work for me is directly targeting your abdomen area, and core work for me is below the neck, above the hip, and it's learning to hold that stable while you move through other ranges of motion. So again, these are the things that are important to the general public. mistakes I see. So trying to fit everything into one session or having an overwhelming amount of exercises. I mean, I've seen programs with 12 plus exercises in it, and you're doing 3 sets of 10 on everything, and it's kind of very monotonous, and you're not long getting into one session, or maybe your squat's starting to feel good by set 3, and then next thing you're on to the next exercise and the next and the next, and you're jumping and changing. It's always good to keep things basic. 4 to 6 exercises executed with enough volume and with enough proper form and technique is going to be a lot more beneficial to you than just trying to pack in everything, pack in all the goals but getting none of the goals. So the goal is to get or fit all of these things on the last slide. So when we look at this list that I was just on, that isn't to fit it. You don't want to just slam them all into one session. Obviously, you're trying to fit them into a program, which is different. So be it over 7 days or a 14-day cycle, you want to fit these things in over that period of time. So it's always good to get a whiteboard or a blank piece of paper, throw it up, write out your days, write out your movement patterns, write out the where you want to do your anaerobic work, where you want your heavy days, where you want this, that, and the other, and plan from there, which we'll look at on the next slide. So linear progression programming is not ideal for a group, and linear progression programming is your traditional kind of bodybuilding program, and it's the one everyone has thought, where you start off with higher volume, low intensity, so light weights, lots of reps, and then as the weights go up, the volume goes down. So as your weights get heavier in the bench press, for example, the sets and reps come down, the volume gets less, and it's just kind of, it's effective if done right, and it's great on an individual level, 1-to-1, but it's within group programming, not everyone progresses the same rate off the same percentages. Everyone's kind of different, and it kind of leaves a lot of gaps in its programming when it's done that way. So I'm not a fan of that for group programming. Scalability is really important, and it's often not kind of considered. So programming one movement for all would be ridiculous. You must be able to scale or adapt for a wide range of clientele. So if I have 4 people in my group and I have programmed, we're doing a squat pattern today is my first lift after the warm-up. Like, I might have 2 people who are training there 4 years. One of them might do a front squat, one of them might do a low bar back squat. I could have someone in there 2 years, but she's a knee injury, so she's doing a barbell box squat. We're just slightly above parallel, because any deeper kind of puts her in a bit of pain. And then I have someone who's just walked in, it's their first day, and we go through the squat or the goblet squat or just technique at the start, finding what's comfortable for them, finding their stance, everything like that. So it's important that no matter what's up there, no matter what's programmed, that you have something for everyone. So if someone walks in, click of a finger, you know exactly what they're doing on their first day. You know exactly what someone's doing who's been training here for 4 years. You know exactly what someone's doing if they have a sore shoulder. They're moving to a safety bar or an easy bar or a front squat or the bodybuilding front squat form. Like there's lots of different adjustments that should be made, but should be made in time and before these people walk into the gym. These are the considerations that need to be made. So a lot of programs are not fluid to their environment. So I'm just going to use an example. Let's just say in this session you've done all the courses on programming. Physiologically, it makes perfect sense to superset your hip thrusts and your chin-ups here in this session. Is that fluid to your space and the gym you have? Do you have to go over the far side of the gym to do the chin-ups and back to the hip thrust? Do you have to spend time with the equipment you have within the group you have, pulling out equipment to make and set up your hip thrusts, and then pull over your bench to jump up to do chin-ups? Things like that. You have to take the fluidity into account as well. So a lot of these plans are point blank boring or specific to a bodybuilding program, which is what's taught in every course as programming. So even the courses I did, in order to pass, you have to be evaluated, and you just put someone through a typical bodybuilding course because it's the way you're taught. So a lot of them are pretty boring, and there are arguments that it doesn't matter if it's boring. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about progress, not having fun. But again, general public, I mean, I even throw things that I would consider fun or funner into my programming to keep me accountable to the rest. So I think that's really important. So where do we begin? So when you're programming movements first, so you program your movement patterns before picking the movements. So you know that you want someone doing a squat specific movement, whether it's a Bulgarian split squat, reverse lunges, back squat, front squat, overhead squat. You just know you're doing a squat in that position. You know, on top of that you're doing anaerobic work that day, you're going heavy that day, etc. You're picking the days that you're putting these patterns and these goals into. So the adaptation you want here is you want your anaerobic work here, and then you put the movements and you put in exactly what you want to do after that. So let's say I go Monday, heavy upper body, superset, RPE 7, keeping it kind of easy. Then aerobic work, 15-minute aerobic block. Do you know, the next day then, I've had a heavy day on my central nervous system, so I want to say, okay, I want to go a little bit lighter today. So we might do a general physical preparedness day, have a bit of body weight, lower body work in it and single leg work in it, but keep things very light and just about quality of movement. Which brings me on to my next point, which is managing CNS fatigue through fluctuating intensity, effort levels and training loads. So managing your central nervous fatigue is important. So you know if you have heavy days or you're going for hard anaerobic work these days or sprints these days, be it on a row or bike or on your feet, ideally these very, very heavy days should be at least 72 hours apart. So same thing goes in the point below. Energy systems and muscle fibers, spread any heavy work 72 hours apart, but build value in the lower intensity work too, because that is your bread and butter. So oftentimes people want to see these heavy days, but if you keep doing them, you're going to hit that point of fatigue where you're not progressing anymore. So it's important to build value in the easier days, definitely. So plan your deloads before the program begins. So don't just wait until numbers are behind and they start to fade or efforts begin to drop. Your clients may be in too deep then. So what I mean there is, you shouldn't just go week to week and say, Jesus, do you know what? A few people are missing lifts here or there, or they're not hitting their percentages, or effort levels are going down, they're tired, let's deload. You should be looking around and saying, right, I'm going to progress the program in 4 to 5 weeks. Everyone's progressing at different rates because we're not doing linear progression. So there's Jack and Jill are beside each other. They're progressing at totally different rates, even though they're still both progressing. That, you know, when they hit week 5, they're both going to kind of deload, as in they're going to just bring down intensity a little bit as we move into a new program or a new block, and we're going to ramp up then again another week. So it's important to plan those things. So you want to input 80% of what they need, 20% of what they want. And much like the food 80-20 rule, eating 80% of what you should, 20% of what you want, things like that. It's just another method. I like it because that 20% is what keeps people accountable. We have a few members, and you know, if they see a few power cleans in there, it's exciting, and they don't mind doing the front rack walk and lunges then directly after because they've got their power cleans. So it's important to input a little bit of what they want. Again, going back to that point, should be fun. Make sure everything on the program can be explained clearly step by step. So there should be nothing on the program that you cannot demo perfectly, that you cannot scale perfectly, and that you cannot adjust to someone's limitations perfectly. Again, fluidity is really important. Make sure that you get huge value out of your limited window. So no one wants to spend 5 minutes changing equipment or setting up equipment. You know, you might have 35, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever it is. You want to make that so smooth that it's from point A to point B to point C. So sometimes you have to give up being optimal in the program to be optimal with your time and optimal with the fluidity of the program. So going over that point again, group programming is inclusive and simple once you get a grip of the principles. Being optimal with a group is very different. You have a lot more considerations and a lot more diversity to work around. Oftentimes, it's more optimal to be fluid than to be perfect. And that is the end of today's slide. Thanks.